tere, oled tulnud vaatama Pesitsusraadio saadet ja täna on see ingliskeelne. Hello, you have come to listen and watch Nestingcast, what's called the Pesitsusraadio in Estonian. And today it's a rare occasion where we have guests from abroad, and that's why we are speaking in English today. Hello, Fran, and hello, Elly.
Hi.
Hello.
Very shortly, could you please introduce yourselves and a little bit about your background and what you have to do with biodiversity, birds, etc. Maybe Fran, you can start.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Fran. I'm a campaigner with Biofuelwatch, which is a small NGO based in the UK, and we mainly campaign around biomass, so burning biomass, wood, plant material in power stations. And we'll be talking more about that and why it's relevant to Estonian forests later on.
And hi, I'm Elly Pepper. I'm based in the US and I work for the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm the Deputy Director of International Wildlife Conservation, and I'm working on the biomass issue and its implications for biodiversity across the world.
Thank you very much. I know that you have a short presentation about what you do, Fran. Maybe we can start with that and continue then with a regular talking and discussion.
Sure. Okay, is the screen share working?
Yes, very well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hang on, can I make it full screen? Okay, so Drax Power Station is in Yorkshire in the north of England. It used to burn coal, it's a long time, and it started co-firing small amounts of wood in 2003 and has now converted almost entirely from burning coal to burning biomass. It's the UK's single largest source of carbon dioxide, and it's also the world's largest burner of trees. To produce electricity, Drax burns more wood every year than the UK can produce, and most of the wood it burns is imported from the southern US, Canada, and also Estonia and Latvia. So, as I said, it's one of the most polluting companies in the UK. But because biomass is classified as carbon neutral, it receives renewable energy subsidies to keep on burning trees from threatened forests. It currently receives just over £2 million every single day. These subsidies are paid for out of energy bills, so everyone is contributing to financing this really dirty and destructive source of energy. So Drax and the UK government claim that biomass is carbon neutral and that it's a more sustainable alternative to coal. But in fact, burning wood produces more carbon dioxide than coal per unit of energy generated, as well as contributing to forest destruction around the world and also impacting really badly on environmental justice, particularly in the southern US. Elly's going to talk more about impacts in the US in a bit. So I won't talk loads about this slide, but you can see the pictures of the trains here. they have slogans on them saying things like carrying sustainable biomass for cost-effective renewable power. And these are the trains that carry wood pellets from the port of Liverpool to Drax power station, and bit of PR, a bit of greenwash to claim that biomass is this renewable form of energy. So yeah, you can see here the trains also say things like powering tomorrow. I'll stop screen sharing for now and just a couple of other things. So the what we know about the wood pellets from Estonia, Drax buys wood pellets from Granule Invest, which is one of the world's largest wood pellet companies, and it's hard to know exactly how much wood is coming from Estonia and how much from Latvia, because it all comes from the port of Riga. The official figure from Estonia is just over 85,000 tons of wood pellets last year, but it's over 600,000 tons is the official figure from Latvia, and we don't know how much of that is actually from Latvia and how much is from Estonia. Maybe I'll stop talking now and we can have more of a conversation later.
Thank you. One question about what you said is that about these subsidies. You said that everybody are actually contributing. So if we think in that way, is it that the platform that you invite everybody to take an action to stop it? Because even if we think that, okay, it's not me who is doing it, subsidies are still kind of also my part.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So a really large part of Biofuelwatch's campaigning in the UK is around the subsidies, and we've been lobbying the government to try and redirect subsidies that are currently paid to biomass to go towards lower carbon, genuinely more sustainable forms of energy like wind and solar power. And currently we're doing that with a coalition of campaign groups from the UK and the US, where a lot of the wood pellets come from. We've got a coalition called Cut Carbon, Not Forests, and we're asking people in the UK to contact their local member of parliament and ask them to call on the government to redirect the subsidies and spend them on genuinely renewable energy. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, Sally. For listeners, Sally was here before, but because of the internet, she kind of dropped out and now she's back in. Hello, Sally. Could you please a little bit introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm so sorry I had internet problems. I'm Sally and I work with Fran in the UK, and we work for Biofuelwatch, and I mostly campaign about UK tree burning in power stations, especially in Drax power station in the north of England. And we're also part of the Cut Carbon Not Forest coalition that Fran's just been talking about.
Thank you. One question to Elly. Why is it important to cut carbon, not trees?
That's a great question. So forests are really important for two major reasons. First, they are very important for sucking carbon out of the air. And we really need our world's forests to meet net zero goals, basically, to save the planet. And then forests are also biodiversity hotspots. They're where some of the largest concentration of the world's wildlife finds a home. And when we cut down the trees and remove the dead wood, lots of dead wood for making the wood pellets, we take away the habitats and the food, such as insects that live in that dead wood that birds rely on. So, you know, I obviously believe in the protection of all land, but I think forests are particularly important to solve the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis that our planet is currently facing.
Thank you. To go forward, Sally, if keeping forests is important, but so is maybe cutting down the forests, there are so many people who say that let's plant trees. What do you say about that?
So planting trees is incredibly important, and it is a really positive thing for people to do. We want to encourage it, but planting young trees isn't as powerful for the climate and isn't as good a solution as actually protecting our existing forests. They can capture far more carbon from the atmosphere than young trees. And a huge issue that we're finding in forests around the world is that these beautiful biodiverse forests are being cut down, turned into wood pellets. And if new trees are planted, they're often monoculture plantations, which support almost no species. Very few animals and birds can live in them. They are often treated with chemicals that are very harmful for biodiversity, and they're not proper forests at all. So as well as planting trees, we have to be really careful which kinds of trees we plant. We really want native biodiverse forests to be planted, but the best possible solution for the climate and for biodiversity is to protect and restore our existing forests.
Fran, how is the situation in UK with planting forests, but also with cutting down and preserving?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks. So the UK is quite heavily urbanized. There isn't a lot of really old forest left, and a lot of our forests aren't very well protected. They're not so much under threat by really large-scale biomass, because, as I said, most of the biomass we burn is imported. But it's interesting that while the UK government claims to be planting trees and trying to protect the climate and protect biodiversity, it's also cutting them down. And so, for example, with new road programs, with the new high-speed rail link known as HS2, that's meant to be improving rail transport from the north to the south of England. But there are actually a lot of ways we could do that by upgrading existing railways rather than building an entirely new one and cutting down trees. Yeah, I'd say the UK government is really hypocritical in a lot of ways by claiming that it's doing all these things for the climate, but at the same time not protecting forests at home, and also burning forests from around the world and calling it renewable energy.
And just to touch on that too, on Fran's point, I think the UK government just committed £540 million to tree planting. And it's just, it is hypocritical, like Fran's saying, and kind of a bit comical, because there's not enough room in the UK to plant this many trees, you know? There's no way to plant enough trees to make up for the carbon emissions that biomass is causing in the UK. So I think that while tree planting is obviously a good thing for our planet, it should be in addition to leaving the existing trees alone, not in place of.
Just to add to what Elly and Fran are saying, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson recently gave a speech where he talked about the importance of protecting biodiversity, and he said extinction is forever. but that was at the same time as his approval of this high-speed rail line, which is cutting down over 100 ancient woodlands. Some of the trees they're cutting down are hundreds of years old, and they're incredibly important for birds, for animals, for insects, and also for the local communities. And they're being completely destroyed. And a lot of protesters are trying to save these ancient woodlands, and people are trying in the media to raise awareness. There is a big campaign to try and protect them, but it's a huge problem at the moment.
And what's so crazy, I think, too, is that all this isn't occurring in, in a world where everything is going fine. This is occurring in a world where scientists, in a United Nations report, are saying that 1 million species face extinction, many within decades, and that there's going to be huge challenges to meet our net zero goals to keep the temperature under 1 degree Celsius, or 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is what scientists are saying we need to combat climate change, to maintain a planet that humans and species can live on. So the fact that they're trying to come up with solutions to these crises, and the solutions are only making things worse, is absolutely insane. And I'm horrified by biomass and how it just seems to have something bad for everyone. It's just really a parade of horribles.
This sounds really horrifying. It is interesting to see that we think that everything what's called good and taking us forward actually in the end takes us nowhere. My question is about what do you think, how is it so that industrials and politicians, how they can sell these ideas what is so bad for everyone, for themselves, for the environment, for biodiversity, so that people actually believe it and they kind of help them to make it happen? Maybe Fran.
Well, I think climate change is really scary, and I think a lot of politicians and business people have maybe acknowledged on some level that it's scary and that things need to change, but haven't really taken in the full implications and what that really means. So I think things like biomass energy, or a lot of solutions, like both from completely false solutions like biomass, but also genuine solutions as well, like solar panels. People are very keen to say, oh, we'll do that, and take that as the way we're going to solve the problem, without actually acknowledging how bad the problem is. And it's a way of not making the systemic changes that are needed. So, for example, Elly in the US is campaigning against forest destruction for biomass. Like, there's also really big implications for environmental racism in the wood pellet industry there. Most of the people who are worst affected by the air pollution and by the climate impacts of logging for biomass, people of colour and lower income communities. And if we took all of these things into account, if we took Indigenous rights, for example, into account, then we'd have a much more holistic way of dealing with the problem. But I think as long as we're trying to deal with it in this extractivist kind of mindset, where we'll solve the problem by more extracting, more logging, more burning, we're never going to get to a real solution.
Just to add to what Fran was saying, I think another part of the problem is that the EU decided a number of years ago that burning trees could be counted as renewable energy, because they assumed that at some point in the future, new trees will grow and they will absorb the emissions we create by burning trees today. And so these biomass companies like Drax use this and say, what we're producing is renewable energy. It's okay, we're green, we're great alternatives to fossil fuel companies. But recently, 500 scientists sent a letter to President Biden and to world leaders asking them to stop counting tree burning as carbon neutral and as renewable energy. And they were asking these world leaders to stop subsidies that are funding this business. So there's a lot of misinformation that the biomass industry is using, that they're pretending it's renewable energy when it's a disaster for the planet and a disaster for wildlife and people.
And one of the falsehoods that the biomass industry is also, perpetuating is they say that a lot of the wood pellets are logged in sustainable ways, like Sally has alluded to. They say, that they're just using thinnings or like little sticks, basically, or residues. They have all these terms, and what they're trying to say is we're not using whole trees. But investigations in the US and in other countries have shown that they actually are using whole trees, big branches, things that really do make a difference for wildlife in providing habitat and food sources. They also say that they're not clear cutting when we have investigations in the Southeast United States, which, as Fran and Sally have said, is where most of the biomass in the UK comes from, that show that there is large scale clear cutting. Also in Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, there's most of the logging for biomass is a result of clear cutting, including in Natura 2000 reserves, which I'm sure you all know, and some of Estonia, as I understand it, some of Estonia's most special nature reserves that are home to really imperiled birds and other species are being clear cut.
That's true. Elly, maybe you can describe a little bit the situation in US.
Yeah, so in the US, most of the biomass is coming from the Southeast United States, from a place called the North American Coastal Plain, and that's actually a biodiversity hotspot, which there aren't too many of those in the world. There's a real diversity of forest types there, and these are forest types that are known for attracting many, many species. And there's also just a broad diversity of imperiled species such as red wolves, Louisiana black bears, which used to be listed under our Endangered Species Act, which is the law in the United States that protects imperiled species. And I think there's about 30 birds in this area that are species of conservation concern in the US, meaning they're protected under some sort of law or agreement. But what is happening in the Southeast US is that there is clear cutting of whole trees, like I mentioned, and it's in, like Fran said, communities of color is where, and underserved communities is where the pellet processing plants are located. And these plants emit terrible things in the air that have health impacts on the people who live nearby.
Just a question from other side, but what can be the solution? Because when people, let's say environmentalists or activists or scientists say that clear cutting is not good, we shouldn't do that, biodiversity loss is not good, we shouldn't do that, and also burning wood pellets in the scale as we are doing right now is also not good. What is good to do then? Sally, do you want to start?
Yes, so one of the most important things we can do is to stop cutting down our existing forests and protect them. And Fran, I think, is just showing some of the wildlife that is under threat in the southern US forests. So a crucial thing to protect communities, to protect wildlife, and to protect the climate is, first of all, to stop logging. And the main way we can try and work against this industry that is destroying our forests is to stop the subsidies, because these big companies like Drax get enormous subsidies from governments to burn trees. And in the UK, we have this Cut Carbon Not Forest coalition with US organizations, and we're asking the UK government to transfer over £1 billion in renewable subsidies from tree burning to renewables like wind and solar panels, wind and solar power. And it could be done quite easily, but we need politicians to take action in the UK. And it's a similar problem in Estonia. We need to make sure that the government in Estonia does not give renewable subsidies or any kind of subsidies for new biomass power stations, because we've discovered that once these companies get the subsidies, it's very hard to try and remove them. It's much better to try and prevent subsidies going, and that's a crucial thing. Another really important solution is for groups around the world to join together and to work together, because we're facing similar problems, that this tree burning in the UK is destroying forests in Estonia, in Latvia, in the southern USA, and in Canada. So we really need to build alliances between groups in all these different countries so that we can raise more awareness in the media and talk to our politicians and talk to as many environmental groups as possible, so that people realize what's happening to our beautiful forests and want to take action.
Do you want to add something, Elly?
No, I think that was a great answer.
Thank you, Fran.
Yeah, I think yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think it's really important that there's communication between places where the forests are being logged, like Estonia, and also the places where they're being burnt, like the UK. And just to add, the other major importers of wood pellets from Estonia, the Netherlands, where the largest company who's involved in biomass burning there is RWE, and also Denmark, where Ørsted Power is doing some co-firing and conversions from coal to biomass. There's also a threat of a new power station in Germany. So I think it's really important to keep track of all of these things, of like where the forests are being destroyed and where they're ending up. And another network that we're quite involved in is the Environmental Paper Network, which is an international network of organizations which started off mainly campaigning around pulp and paper, but has also more recently started looking at biomass as well, because that's the other really large threat to forests that they identified. And so yeah, we're using that as a way of making links with more forest protection groups around the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One idea what I was thinking, how would you comment that? Should we somehow think about how to use less energy? Maybe Elly?
I mean, Fran or Sally could probably answer this better than I, but yes, I think obviously we all need to reduce our energy consumption. It's, you know, it's just that it's imperative that we do that. It's an absolute must. But it's very hard for people to do because of these perverse incentives that Fran was talking about, how energy companies make it very easy for you to just use as much energy as you want and not think about it twice. I know that I have to think about it every day and make a concerted effort. But yes, that's the top thing, that we all need to live our lives in a way that just respects nature so much more than we do right now.
Do you want to add something, Sally or Fran?
Just to add a little bit in the UK, I think Elly's answer was fantastic. And a huge problem we have in the UK is that the government is giving money to the biomass industry through these renewable subsidies. Drax receives £2 million every day, and these subsidies are paid for through our energy bills. We all have to pay for Drax's forest destruction and tree burning. And there's very little money available in the UK for genuine renewables like wind and solar power. So by transferring the subsidies to these real renewable energies, we can help to create new green jobs. And as well as reducing energy, that's another very important thing for people in the UK and around the world, that we need to invest in real alternatives that don't harm the planet in the same way as burning trees and burning fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit about biodiversity loss, and also about this time of year when birds are nesting, because our campaign, or why this radio, this is because Päästämme metsät, they are doing a campaign to get this law so that this logging wouldn't happen, or any work actually what is harming birds wouldn't happen during the time they are nesting there, and also other animals and insects. How is the situation in UK and also in US in that matter?
With respect to birds? Yeah, I mean, I think birds are one of the most impacted species by biomass, and with International Dawn Chorus Day coming up on May 2nd, that's the day that we can hear, the most bird song on any day of the year, I guess. And so it's something that we're thinking a lot about. And many of the bird populations we're talking about are already suffering so greatly, even before we add biomass and logging to the mix. Because of climate change, because of so many different issues. And so when you add this, it's just, it's the last nail in the coffin, sort of. And the US bird populations are really suffering as a result of biomass, logging for biomass. Actually, a lot of the birds in the United States, in the Southeast United States, are classified as threatened with extinction by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And that means that their populations are just declining really rapidly. And same with, in Estonia and in the Baltics, a lot of the birds that are being decimated by biomass are actually protected species. In Lithuania, protected in the Lithuanian Red Book of protected species. And so, in my mind, if a species is protected, we're supposed to do everything we can to make sure that species does not go extinct. And governments just aren't abiding by their own laws. And that's what I am always very committed to justice. I'm an attorney. That's what frustrates me the most, just that the governments aren't following their own laws, and they're being so hypocritical in their actions.
Thank you. Do you want to add, Sally or Fran, about UK?
It's not specifically for biomass, but we also have laws in the UK that are supposed to protect birds. It's against the law to disturb or to destroy a bird's nest. And yet that is being completely broken at the moment with the logging for this new high-speed railway line. Many campaigners have seen birds' nests being destroyed. They're worried about bats being harmed as well, and they're supposed to be a protected species. So it's this similar problem to the US, that there are meant to be laws protecting wildlife in the UK, but they're not being kept to. And there's an organisation here called the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and it does a big annual bird survey every January, when as many people as possible take part and count the number of birds who come into their garden or into a park one weekend in the year. And they're finding that species that were common are now declining throughout the UK. So it's a huge issue for wildlife around the world, that they're suffering from the climate crisis, and now forest destruction as well is making the situation even worse.
And also, just to add, I think what's really interesting about birds, I actually used to work at a wildlife rehabilitation center, and I took care of birds that had been hit by trains and couldn't survive in the wild. And what's so interesting about birds, and I think differentiates them from other species, is that, you know, many bird species are very sensitive. If there is any interference in their nesting habitat, you know, if one human comes into the nesting habitat, studies have found that they can't breed. You know, there are areas where tourists will come, and it could not even be that many tourists, but just human presence can actually prevent them from breeding. So they can be much more, I guess, sensitive to human disturbance than a lot of other creatures, I think. And that has contributed to the decline of a lot of bird species.
Just to add, also birds in Canada are now under increasing threat, because really wonderful old growth forests in Canada are now being logged, and investigations have shown that whole trees are being cut down there as well. And there are other endangered species like caribou in Canada, and their habitat is now under threat from the biomass industry. And Drax has just bought an enormous wood pellet company called Pinnacle Renewable Energy. So Drax is planning to cut down trees in Canada, and it will then burn them and also export them to other countries.
One question is about, how do you think is the awareness of people, like in UK and in US, about these things happening to biodiversity and this logging and everything? Is it really calm, the society, or is there really, do you feel that there is happening this kind of, not strikes, but people really showing up and taking actions to stop it? Maybe Fran.
Yeah, so I feel like biomass isn't as well known as a threat to the climate as, for example, coal and fossil fuels are. People have been fighting against fossil fuels for a long time, and that campaign has really grown. And that's part of why Drax has stopped burning coal now. That's an example of the success of that campaign by lots and lots of activists over the last decade or longer. So biomass is less well known. It's becoming more well known. I feel like both among grassroots climate campaigners and among bigger NGOs, awareness is growing, not fast enough. So we at Biofuelwatch, for example, we have a newsletter, we have a social media presence, so we try to share information like that. We do events like this. We also do webinars and film screenings. And on that, it's Drax's annual general meeting next week of April. So we'll be asking people to take action where they are, to make a banner or a placard with a message for Drax and a message for the UK government to say our forests aren't fuel. So we're asking people to take action on the 21st of April next week, and you can see our yeah, we'll share the website. You can see some information on that on our website and our Facebook page. And also tomorrow night, the 15th of April, we've got a webinar where we'll be talking more about some of these things. We'll be particularly talking about the biodiversity angle, about the forests that are being lost in the US, in Canada, and in Estonia. And we'll have community campaigners from those 3 countries talking about the forests that they're trying to protect. And that'll be a chance to learn more about about biomass and about Drax and how we can take action together. And again, if you go on biofuelwatch.org.uk, or our Facebook and Twitter are both just Biofuelwatch, and you can find out on there.
Thank you. Sally, do you want to add?
Just to say that we're really excited you're going to be joining us tomorrow at the webinar. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'd love to learn more about what's happening to Estonian forests. I think people in the UK do not realise that we are paying for Estonian forests to be cut down, to be turned into wood pellets, and to be burned in Drax power station, and people will be shocked. So it will be great for them to learn more about what's happening to forests in Estonia, in the southern US and Canada.
And I just want to put in a final plug too, to please follow Cut Carbon Not Forests on Twitter and Facebook. We have an Instagram. Cut Carbon Not Forest has all those social media accounts, and we'd love to have more followers.
About money, I mean, cutting trees and burning them, getting subsidies, it all gives money, and with money you can do campaigns. But people who do campaigns to talk about keeping biodiversity or valuing biodiversity, people who are scientists or activists, environmentalists, how would you describe the equality or inequality of this money? Because everything needs money, and also campaigning needs money, right? Maybe you can start, Sally?
It's definitely an unequal struggle. In the UK, Drax has huge subsidies from the UK government, and it has a very close relationship with some members of parliament. The local politician gets money sometimes from Drax to go to wood pellet conferences. And also one of the executives at Drax is a member of the UK Committee on Climate Change. And that committee advises the government on climate policy. So Drax has a lot of budget for lobbying government. It can pay to talk to politicians. It can pay for academic research. It has huge amounts of funding. Whereas as grassroots activists, we are trying to raise some funds, but we don't get funding from government in any way. And also there's a lot of inequality in the US because many of the communities who are most affected by the wood pellet industry are already living in poverty, and they're already suffering from other industrial pollution. So there's a huge injustice. It's very hard for the people who are worst affected by this industry to fight back, and that's why we really need to work together in all these different countries and support each other as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to add anything, Elly, of the situation in US?
I think it's also very unequal. I mostly work on the UK side, but in the US, we also support biomass and industrial scale biomass and utilize it and prop it up as a clean fuel. And all of this, it does need to stop. And it all goes back to what Fran was talking about before, about the fact that we don't place the same kind of values on nature that we do on money. and that if we actually valued our ecosystems in a way that even financially accounted for the benefits they provide to humans, and that's not even, that's aside from the value of them in themselves, because I do believe that nature and animals have their own value. They're not just of service to us humans. But if we actually accounted for the benefits that they provide to us financially, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And that's what really needs to change.
This is very interesting, because I have thought that probably if people would have somehow done the forest, so it wouldn't be by itself, but some people would create the forest, the animals, then it would have been like, or people would see it as development, as something really special. Wow, which kind of systems there are, how they do it, how people could think of these kind of things. But now when it's just there, we want to, I don't know, it seems that we want to develop always, and we want to find new ways to do things. But if something is already there, it's not in our nature to just protect it, because it's then we are like doing nothing, and doing nothing is kind of, I don't know, procrastinating, and so it is kind of meaningless. You should, I don't know, aim, you should go forward, you should have big dreams, and to just want to protect a forest, like what does it give to you? And this seems to me really kind of one of the roots, but of course it doesn't, maybe it's not, but somehow it seems to me that if one of you would have created a forest, then people would really see you as a somehow special, and would like, wow, how did you do that? But for ending it, maybe everyone could just tell us your last words, what I didn't ask or what did not come out, so that you could really say out what is in your mind. Fran?
Yeah, I don't have loads more to say. I guess one thing to point out is that this year, if it goes ahead, the UK is meant to be hosting the COP26, the International Climate Summit. And obviously with COVID, we don't know what that's going to look like in real life. It's usually an opportunity for a lot of campaigners and activists to get together. It won't be the same this year, but it will be. So Drax, for example, will be there lobbying and will be saying, we're offering this renewable solution, we're going to become carbon negative, which is a thing they're saying at the moment that's a topic for a whole other program. And so I think it's really important that as activists, we keep countering that, and we keep supporting each other in whatever way we can, whether that's in real life in the forests or out on the streets, or whether it's online as it has been for the last year or so. And yeah, as Biofuelwatch, we're part of a coalition of civil society organisations in the UK that are trying to take action towards the COP26. So yeah, if you follow us on social media or sign up to receive our newsletter, you'll learn more about that side of things.
Thank you.
And I would say similarly that in the next year, the Convention on Biological Diversity is going to meet. And it's a very important meeting because we're hoping that countries will adopt a goal to protect 30% of their lands and oceans by 2030, with an ultimate goal of 50% of the Earth by 2050. And obviously, protecting lands and oceans solves so many problems, right? It protects biodiversity, it stops companies, hopefully, from plowing down forests, and it prevents pollution. It would do so much. And one of the things we've been highlighting is the fact that the UK is leading the charge on this. They have committed to 30 by 30, and they're actually one of the chairs of the High Ambition Coalition, which is like the group of countries that's like really going above and beyond. And yet, what are they doing in other countries? You know, they're plowing down forests, they're decimating species. So I'm very hopeful about 30 by 30, but I think it's also time to call attention to the hypocrisy of these countries that are saying one thing and doing another.
Thank you. Sally.
Thank you. Just to add to what Fran was saying earlier, we have some really important events coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we'd love it if people in Estonia might like to take part. We have a webinar tomorrow, which is connecting campaigners from Estonia, Canada, the southern US, and the UK, who are all being affected by Drax's tree burning. And that will be at 9 p.m. Estonian time. We'd love it if as many people as possible can come along, and we'll be hearing more about how Drax is linked to Estonian forests. And then on Wednesday, the 21st, it's a really important day because it's Drax's annual general meeting. Drax is celebrating that it's just bought this huge Canadian company and it can expand its tree burning, which is such a tragedy for forests around the world. So we need as many people as possible to take action that day. And we'd love it if people in Estonia would like to take a photo with maybe beside a tree or a plant or with an animal and just with a sign. And you can use words like Axe Drax or forests are not fuel, or you can use your own message for Drax. It would be brilliant if people in Estonia can take part so that Drax can see it's not just people in the UK who are worried, it's people all around the world. And then the final event we have coming up very soon is that we're taking part in a huge event that the COP Coalition is organising, and it's called From the Ground Up. And it's bringing together activists from all around the world. And we are going to be taking part in a session on Friday, the 23rd of April at 12:30 p.m. Estonian time. And we're talking about how fossil fuel campaigners and forest and land rights campaigners can all work together and support each other. And it would be amazing if anyone from Estonia can join that and take part. And we work very closely with activists in the UK, especially many groups who are in Extinction Rebellion in the UK. And I know we would love to link up with Estonian groups, and any way we can help support your campaigns and raise more awareness of what's happening to Estonian forests, we would love to do. Thank you so much for inviting us here today.
Thank you very much, and aitäh kõigile kuulamast ja kuulmiseni järgmisel nädalal.